Hello, Mara. Happy to have you on the show.
Hi, Nate. I'm excited to be able to talk with you today about leadership and wellness and all kinds of fun things, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, our listener will have heard many times over about the importance of wellness as a leader, and your unique background, especially in the medical world and in upward mobility, if you will, in terms of how we can be more effective leaders, is very timely, especially in this day and age where we suffer so much with a lack of, if you will, nourishment as leaders from both all the different areas of leadership. What would you consider to be an area of leadership that you've seen in your journey that really needs attention today?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think, and probably from your perspective, you would agree, leadership is changing. And as we see changes taking place in the industry, I think AI is changing the dynamic of leadership very quickly. The fact that services and products are requiring us to be more creative in the leadership role with vision to be able to move forward. And the importance to me on that is the recognition that emotional intelligence, soft skills, and what I think is my kind of core area that I love to work on is you're showing up as a leader, and it's really about doing some of your own inner work to evolve and to be the best leader possible. And it's funny, I don't know if you get the same reaction that I do, but when I have a client, they sometimes say to me, often say to me, I feel very vulnerable when I'm speaking with you. And I am always taken back by that because to me, it's not about being vulnerable. It's about evolving further and stretching further as a leader. And so when we take time to go deeper into how you're showing up, it's really kind of fascinating the growth that you have and the changes that you can have within your leadership role. So I do that through because I work with the GW Center for Integrative Medicine. I do this through kind of an esoteric approach of looking at it from a mind, body, spirit connection and really helping individuals to connect the dots about what each aspect is trying to indicate to them, message to them, and how they can evolve further as a leader with that.
Yeah, I mean, how you're showing up is it's so important, and we briefly discussed this actually on a previous podcast just a couple episodes ago. So this is a great addition to how you view it and how important it is to show up with your best self. And you talk about the vulnerability piece. I think as leaders, the more confident we are about our, I want to say our own ability, but our sense of centeredness and clarity, the more we can be vulnerable in a leadership context. Of course, it has to be appropriate in the kind of vulnerability that we're talking about.
Mhm.
I think there's a beauty to to being more vulnerable as a leader and stating that, hey, you know what? I don't have things figured out all the way, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean that you don't have a pathway or you can't make the pathway. They're not clear in your vision. I think it's important to like take a step back and say, we need to be clear where we're going as leaders. And you worked in Washington for a long time, and maybe another episode we'll talk about the lobbying world. I love that conversation. Uh, but as you know, so much leadership happening in Washington, and really the primary conversation, and right now we're in an election cycle, and so it's mostly about vision, right? Where are we going, and how are we going to get there? I mean, those are the two questions that maybe we're not asking verbally, but that's what the questions we are intuitively asking as leaders and followers.
Absolutely. It is about the vision, right? Leadership's all about the vision and then how you get the results. And those are two different types of skill sets. You have to really tap into your creative nature, your, if you will, intuitive guidance to be able to figure out where you're going to get that next service, that next product, how you're going to change, how you're going to inspire the team to move forward. And then getting the results is really the basics, the fundamentals of leadership that we've known about. And that's the part that I think is fascinating. Like what gets me excited is hearing how AI, I mean, who knows where AI is going to ultimately go, But one of the key things that it seems to be indicating is great leaders are going to be required to have more of these soft skills, that emotional intelligence, and time with themselves and their teams for that creativity that's going to be required to get to the next iteration of what's taking place. And what I find fascinating is when I'm working mind, body, and spirit, and have had the healthcare background that I have with doctors saying you have chronic stress and you need to go do something about this stress related illness that you have. Most often, the person's walking away going, what does that mean? Like, how do I handle my stress? And leaders are doing the same thing. If you're too much in your, fight or flight response, if you're in that chronic stress approach, you're not going to have the space and time for that creative ability to tap into, to be able to get to that inspiration, to get to that next service, that next product, to see that next vision that you need for moving forward.
It's a good point. So, Mara, can a leader not have the self-awareness to know that they're in a chronic stress right now? I mean, someone listening might be saying, hey, you know what? That's just my day. And maybe maybe you're drowning and you don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not taking enough breaths of air. Maybe a great analogy is someone who has COPD and perhaps is like, man, I don't know, I'm always tired. And then I actually a buddy of mine I just thought he was always tired, and so he went to the doctor, said he has like a 90% sleep deprivation. And so he needed the CPAP machine and be able to breathe better. And interestingly, after the process of working that out, I mean, a new person.
Yeah.
It's full of energy. A half an hour conversation. I'm like, wow, this person never had like 4 words to say. And so in like fashion, sometimes we are completely deprived of the resources we need to function as effectively as we possibly can as leaders, and we don't even know it.
Correct. It's all about that optimal performance within yourself. And I'm going to take it down to like 7th grade, maybe. I'm not sure. It was 7th grade for me, I think, was something I'd totally forgotten about, which is the autonomic nervous system. So if you recall, there's 2 components, right? You have the sympathetic, which is your fight or flight. You're waiting for that proverbial lion to jump out at you at all times. And so your body physically is getting ready to run. So it's the muscles are tensing up, all that constriction is occurring. And then you have the parasympathetic, which is literally called the rest and digest. So the sleep, the ability to sleep, the ability to digest your food, irritable bowel syndrome, things like that show up in the parasympathetic side. And to your point, what I see in my clients is they are predominantly over in that fight or flight response. And it's not helping them from a homeostasis, balanced perspective. But when you get them over to the parasympathetic side, and for each person, it's very different what works to get you over to the parasympathetic side. That's when more clarity comes through. That's when more creativity comes through. That's when you have something going on that you need to problem solve, and the answer or the next step becomes more clear because you allow yourself to be balanced out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's...
As you're saying that, I'm feeling the parasympathetic starting to exude itself. But you're right. That's important, I think, to again recognize where are my energies focused. And sometimes someone listening is like, look, I'm in a crisis situation right now, and I'm fighting and I'm fleeing. And we can talk about the rest of it later. You may be in a situation to where, okay, this is my only option. However, you might have a counter argument to that and say, maybe that's not the only way to go about this.
Maybe it's not. One of the things I say, to your point, because it's so true, and, leaders are busy, so completely understand that. And you're right. There's sometimes so many fires taking place that they have to address at once. And there are other days when what I get from the leaders that I work with is, Maura, I get up and I run for a half an hour, but then it feels as if I'm in that fight or flight for the rest of the day. Or Maura, I get up and I meditate for half an hour, but I'm in that fight or flight, right? And so there's 24 hours in a day. If you are predominantly stuck in that fight or flight, it's not just having physical implications. It's clogging up your mental thoughts. It's not allowing you to be excited about the vision that you have for your company. So as a result, what I do is say, it's great you do that for half an hour. If you want to keep doing that, please do. But the key part here is we have to think about how to incorporate short little techniques through the day to help your body physically get back to a place of homeostasis. And with that, they are always shocked and surprised how fast they get, clarity on problem solving and issues to be able to resolve things faster too.
So true, so true. A couple of examples that come to my mind in my day. Of course, I own an accounting and advisory firm, so even today is a milestone because corporate returns are due today, tomorrow. So we've got so much, and at the same time, it takes some time to do this because for me, having a conversation that's meaningful, I'm a collaborator, so I love great conversation. It's therapeutic and it pulls me out of some of the fight or flight in the moment of, oh my goodness, deadlines and work and problem solving and did this get filed or make sure this client's got this paperwork or we just got these new financials and they don't look anything like the old ones, right? Those are moments where I found to integrate in my day. And what's great about technology, and we'll talk about AI a little bit later too, is that we've got calendars and we can add margin in our calendars for those specific things. And even I talked about this before. You can see, if you're watching this, you can see my background. It's a sunny day and it's nice in our town. Just go outside for a few minutes. Mm-hmm. And I love just to feel a little bit of vitamin D and just unwind. And I found, I don't know if you found this too, and someone listening, sometimes problems, as you said, the creativity side, the problem that you had an impasse to get over, a hurdle, suddenly you find an answer, a solution. Because, I suspect it's part of what you're talking about here in terms of how the brain works and how the body works and the spirit and the mind.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I love that. When I sometimes train medical students at GW here, the number one thing they say is the way for them to get into their parasympathetic side is being out in nature. So, you're so lucky, Nate, to have those trees right behind you to be able to do that. But nature is often a go-to source for people to be able, and doesn't have to take long, but just to kind of recalibrate and to get yourself balanced again to come back and make some decisions. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and those decisions sometimes will be different than before you, at least me, for example, before I went out. And I've had to force myself to do this. And I've always been a very, what I would consider efficient person in terms of like my day is so efficient. And when I first got a dog, a few years ago, is that we had a family dog and the dog needed to get walked. And at first, and I was working on my PhD and I was doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't have time for this. This is just another, this is taking away. However, what I found was that, first it was like a 10 to 15 minute, then it became a 25. And then I went all the way up to 45 minutes every single morning. And it cleared my mind and my spirit and even my body for the day ahead. And now it's a non-negotiable. And I'm actually more efficient because I gave that time up for something that I thought initially was going to zap my productivity.
And that's exactly the point, is you need that balance between both states. I'm going to even add a little more to this and say that our mind is a wonderful source. Wonderful, right? It compares, it contrasts, it data analyzes, it helps us with those performance pieces. We badly need to have our mind. It's so important, but it is tied to the fight or flight. And the mind loves to keep us either worried about the future or thinking about the past. It's not in the present moment. And so you have that equation that we here in the US get so stuck in. And if you come over to the parasympathetic, you can use different words for it, but you can tap into your creativity, your intuition, how you get those intuitive downloads that don't make sense, but provide the clarity you need. And so those two go together as well. And sometimes when you're in the fight or flight as a leader, all you need to do is get 10 minutes over on that other side to be able to get such clarity and to kind of know what you're doing.
Well, this is important because I'll give you a little more detail on some of these walks. And when I've got my phone and I'm reading an email, or I'm searching for something as I'm walking, the the end result, the effectiveness of the walk is diminished for me. I found that I don't feel as clear and as refreshed. This morning was a great example. I was up before dawn and I got to watch the sunrise. However, I was sifting through messages and so on and so forth. And I'm like, Nate, stop. Look at how beautiful that sky is with those few little clouds and all of that. And I think something, and again, I'm not a medical practitioner and I'm not been in your space, but something is happening within me when I don't answer emails or look at problem solving during those walks.
Yeah, absolutely. And from my perspective, what you're describing is you may have been a little bit in fight or flight, and then you moved yourself over to that parasympathetic side, that rest and digest. So that just helped bring a bit of centeredness and balance. And think about that as a leader. Then you're so much better because you're able to make better decisions. You're at a balanced state. So if there's conflict, you're able to stay centered to be able to resolve the issues. So it really has an impact on leadership as well by doing that. Yeah.
What else has an impact? Does music have an impact? Does, your environment have an impact? What are some
Yeah.
other pieces of this equation?
So this is the part I love. The fight or flight and mind are fairly predictable as to how it shows up for people. So for instance, when people are in kind of the anxiety is kind of used quite a bit, but when your mind goes into those mental ruminations and it goes into stories that aren't necessarily true, sometimes I have the leaders that go, what do I do, Mara? I can't possibly get over to my parasympathetic side. And what I suggest at that time is, hey, you know what? It happens to me still to this day, and I'm an active practitioner in meditation and every other technique that can kind of bring me back to my center. Sometimes you just need to allow yourself 10 minutes to watch with self-awareness your mind just go. Just let it, just say, oh my gosh, look at how it's going. It is saying I can't do this job. It's saying I'm an imposter with this, whatever it may be, let it go. And then after 10 minutes, see how you're doing. If you need another 5 minutes, allow that to happen. It's the mind trying to keep you safe and secure, but it runs stories that we don't necessarily agree with. And remember, we have somewhere between 50 to 70 thoughts a day. So are they fueling you? Are they helping and supporting you? Or are they running stories that aren't accurate? Then we switch over to the parasympathetic and your intuitive self. And the question becomes, this part is different for everyone. So one person, it might be physical exercises that really help them. It might be that they go for a run and after that run, they receive mental clarity. And it has to be physical. So for instance, if all of this, you advance further and further and further. So if they're about to go into a very tense meeting, it's not a good idea for me to tell them, okay, let's go through breathing techniques, because that doesn't work for them. I have to come up with something physically that they can do to release some of that kinetic energy to be able to walk into the meeting better. For other people, meditation or, forest bathing, like going out into nature, that works, but everybody's very unique. So when I'm working with someone, I'm really saying we need to determine what your parasympathetic package is that's going to help you as a leader in times where you need to incorporate it. So it's very different.
Indeed, yeah, and finding those ways to get that release as an individual is important. I've found that all those things are great for me, whether it's physical or the meditation piece. Also, you talked about intuition and forecasting or foresight, thinking about the future, even in a moment of high stress or chronic stress. I think about I've been practicing, is this situation going to affect me in 5 years? And I project myself to the future self. And someone listening will have heard me talk about this in the past. And so the overwhelming majority of the issues I had 5 years ago, I can't even recall today. Some, of course, we want to be sensitive to, a major life change or a death or something like that. However, the majority of things I'm concerned about right now, like a file or like my flat tire or, the kid back talking, whatever it might be, or a client unhappy, any of those things. Uh, Generally speaking, like half a decade ago, it matters not. So what I've been working on is projecting my future self today and say, hey Nate, hey, guess what? I'm calling you in from the future. It's a non-issue. You can let it go, and let's just focus on getting through and moving on. That helps me tremendously, and I have not perfected it. I have not perfected it, but I'm certainly moving in that direction.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's a great way of doing it. These, different types of techniques are just incredible. And it brings us back to that emotional intelligence, which the first component is being self-aware, right? Is like, self-awareness to me is like being a witness to your life and saying, wait a second, what's happening here that is something that I need to work through? A big part of what I work with leaders on is what is under your control and what isn't, and identify the difference with that. But become aware as a witness as to where things are showing up, just like you did.
Mm.
And then once you become aware of it, and once you become aware of listening to your body and seeing what emotions might be popping up for you, and seeing how maybe the spiritual aspect, which can be all about inspiring and passion, if you're working day in and day out and you're not getting that inspiration or that passion, that also deflates us. It keeps our energy low. So all that's an aspect that's so important to go to self-regulation. And that self-regulation then is about pulling out tools from your toolbox that we get to develop to say, okay, how can I readjust this so that I'm feeling good and feeling like, okay, I'm ready to take this on and move forward. Right?
I love it. Yeah. And all of this relating to this idea of centeredness and especially the emotion. I love emotional intelligence from all of those aspects of, starting with, let's start with self-awareness. That self-awareness is so important to do a scan, perform a scan on a regular interval. Because sometimes, I don't know if you've struggled with this, but I know it's happened to me. Like I don't feel right. I just don't know why. And then through some discovery, because we get awareness through discovery, and like, oh, that's right. You saw someone at Starbucks this morning, and maybe you accidentally cut them off when you're getting through the drive-thru. You didn't mean to, but they told you were number one, and but you forgot about it because you were busy going through your day and getting your stuff. But internally, there was a little bit of a struggle, like, oh man, I feel bad. But and then later, so you don't remember necessarily why you don't feel right, but you're holding on to that. And I found that in my own life. And so, okay, that's why I don't feel um, centered right now. I don't feel clearly able to be my maximum self, my best self. That doesn't mean that sometimes that can be considered somewhat trivial. Sometimes it's a big thing. We unfortunately lost one of our pets over the weekend, and just a lot of heartache around that, and struggled, and just had an illness, and just couldn't beat it, and it was a hard weekend for us, and being okay to grieve in that moment, saying, you know what, we're at a time of grieving in that, but recognizing that in the moment. At the same time, for us, and this is what I like to try to do as much as possible, I've been working toward this over the years, is have gratitude and appreciation for what I have been given, rather than anger and bitterness of what I have not. And that's life-giving, Mara, at least for me, because so many things like our pet only lived 3 years, and he was just such an adorable little dog who we just loved to death. And at the same time, think, well, that's 3 years. That's 3 years that we had to enjoy with each other. And I want to have gratitude and appreciation for that time, and live in that space. And that goes with in business with clients. There's just the other day, I had a client who is moving on to another firm that best suits their model and their industry. And we had a conversation, and I had the same conversation. Hey, I'm so thankful for the time we've had together, that we've walked together during this time. And now you get to embark on another leg of your adventure, of your journey with a fit that makes the most sense for your business. And my blessing. I'm so happy that we got this, and it's a much different conversation, Laura,
It is
and it's a
very
much different place
right.
emotionally.
Right. And it's energy giving to be able to continue on in everything else that you're doing. So that's and there's evidence-based research on this too. So in Rutgers University developed an eight dimensions of wellness. And what they said is there's four inner components and four outer components. So the inner, we've kind of talked about mind, emotions, spiritual, and physical. So you can go through that to kind of just develop and understand how are you doing right now from an inward perspective. The outward, let's see if I can do this, is finance, social, career, and finance, and I think environmental. And so it's about taking a look at that. Now, it's a snapshot in time, but I often give this to my clients to help them take a moment to say, where am I with things? Because it's so important as leaders to take a little breather to say every once in a while, wait a second, how am I doing in the big scheme of things? I had a client the other day who said, Mara, when you made me do that, I realized I was not having fun. And I love to have fun at work. And so to take a moment to analyze it and say, wait a second, where am I? How am I doing? What do I need to change for me to be happy and having a good time, but also show up as a really good leader?
Yes, and I think that's so important because we have that opportunity as leaders to have influence in those areas. And there's a couple scholars, French and Raven, had a study many years ago on the social bases of power, and of course, there's different bases of power. One of them is power and over your environment. This was a further study that by Bass that took their research and added to it. And I think about like that environment. You can create an environment if you desire to have fun and it gives you life and it helps you to become centered and more effective as a leader. You can do that. You have the power to make the choices to create a fun environment. I mentioned music earlier, especially during this time where we're super busy. I've got a disco station on my Pandora that I play nonstop. And yesterday I was just jamming with my disco station, and all my hits from the 70s and of course the end of the 80s. It was super fun. I was all by myself in my room and doing my work, but the work was so much more enjoyable because I instituted that control and that power over my environment that influenced my centeredness and my mood.
Yeah, it's so important to be able to do that. I'm glad you did that. That's awesome. One of the things I do, the mind, body, spirit sounds so kind of esoteric, but it really does. When you start to make friends with your body, when you start to be like, I really do and really can have messaging, you really do get further insights as to how you're showing up. So let me give you an example. If someone can meditate, I ask them to identify their three biggest stressors at the moment. And so the first one, we go through it and I have them meditate and say, where is it on your body? Yeah. And they'll identify it like so quickly. And then I'll ask them to go deeper, like describe it. How did you know it was there? And they'll say things like tension, right? Maybe pain, words like that. And the words that they're using are feeling words. Sure. And so then we go to the second one, the third one. Now we've got a whole picture of what's taking place. To your point, a situation that happened where you cut someone off earlier in the day, you may not think that it's got any influence over you at all, but it might. And when it shows up on the chronic meditation or the chronic stress meditation, it's fascinating because the person's like, I had no idea that was happening. But we're able then, with each of their stressors, to go back through using the feeling words that they mentioned and go deeper into what's causing the issues here. Like what's the bigger issue that you need to resolve to be able to move forward on this particular stress. Sometimes it's a feeling that they don't have enough power. Sometimes there's some other scenario that's coming up. Often life patterns that we have, as humans, we're we have our flaws. Those life patterns may also be showing up. And if they're happening personally, they're most likely happening as a leader too. So if you're not able to address conflict, and it's showing up in your personal life, it's most likely showing up in your leadership role too. So it's about being able to bring awareness to it and then be able to kind of address it too.
That's good. Someone listening, I mean, that I've heard this is the second time this week I've heard that question. What's most troubling or stressful for you right now, or what worries you most? Of course, you said your top three, but even if you just narrow it down to, okay, well, if you can't think of three, think of one right now. But the follow-up question, is, where is it showing up? Right? Is that what your follow-up question was?
Where is it showing up on your body? Because your body, remember, is a team player with you. So this is what the doctors know. They say, oh, this situation is stress related. Let's say like headaches might be stress related. Well, then you don't know what to do with that. So you have to go deeper into it. Why is it stress related? What's happening about a stressor in my life? And what do I need to know about it to be able to release it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important. So ask yourself, if you're listening, ask yourself, what's really stressing me right now? And just take a few moments to do some inventory and do some seeking, some discovery on that. If I were to say for me right now, my greatest stressor is, I would say work. I'm not going to call it work-life balance, but harmony is certainly my top list of. And there's just we're busier than ever, Mara, which is great when you're in business, and we've been in business. It'll be 30 years in
Congratulations.
Thank you. So you get a reputation, right? If you do good work, you get a reputation. And then of course, what do you have to do? Well, you have to scale, unless you just say no more bets, right? No more clients. But of course, then you say, well, of course we'll take care of you. But of course, then the scale, and you've got to add infrastructure. And then when you get to a certain point, the scale model changes, and then you're helping people, but you're also having to build your business. And then of course you have lots of commitments. You have family commitments. You have social commitments. You have commitment to yourself.
Okay.
To maintain this temple. So there may be some. So for me, I'm in a season right now to where I'm that development is certainly it certainly has its challenges, right? And, life is full of challenges. No big deal. It's all gonna work out. I'm driven and determined and confident that we'll continue that I'll continue to be a good steward of what I'm entrusted with, right? That's really my. However, as you said, in the moment, there's a fight or flight. And so I've got to find the time. Someone listening, it may be like, Nate, totally me too. I'm in a very similar season, and I've got to learn to say no. I've got to learn to say no. It's okay to say no. I've had a lot of episodes on the freedom of saying no, and so that I could say yes to what I can give my best, and finding that centeredness in that journey. It's not easy. It's not easy, and then sometimes you need help.
Right, absolutely. And the more you are in tune with what your body might be indicating, you can make a faster decision. So when you get those stress headaches, it could be a time for you maybe to look at saying no or delegating more, or, there's something about what's happening that needs to be reviewed to say, okay, as a leader, I need to do something differently. And what's that look like?
Yeah. And evaluate. I think also sometimes as leaders, we can be pretty hard on ourselves. And sometimes we need to give ourselves a little grace. Sometimes we might be doing better than we think, because we give ourselves maybe like a B minus sometimes, and others might be like, no, you're exceeding my expectations. So that's another piece of I think of finding that awareness and that regulation is also with communication and asking for feedback. Hey, where can I be more effective? Where have I been effective? And sometimes that's a release in and of itself. I found that with clients, we've got a new program we've been working on the last year on our advisory side, and folks love it. However, it's a new program. So getting feedback, hey, if you did this or we did, I'd love to see some of this. And what that does is it opens the door to back to that creativity and innovation side of the brain. Say, you know what, that sounds like a great idea. Q4, Q1, we're gonna start working on implementing that. It also gives us margin, has the conversation, and then it takes a little pressure off to do what you thought should have been done 6 months ago, because guess what? You're building something. It takes time to build.
And thank you for bringing this back around too, because, your great leaders knew the importance of taking time to be able to come up with that creativity. So Steve Jobs used to go away for 2 weeks, right? And meditate to be able to kind of get the next download for what he was going to do with his Apple products. Albert Einstein knew this very well. And so if you look at the leaders, Bill Gates goes away, but he reads books ferociously, right?
Walt Disney.
Yeah, Walt Disney. So all of them had this approach to being able to tap into that parasympathetic, that intuitive, creative side. And I think with AI, this is going to be even more critical of leadership and leadership teams, is to determine how they can help their employees to tap into this component. And so it is a question of, how do you get that creativity? For me, what I see in leaders is when they're doing something that they feel like they lose track of time, it is when they're really in the flow of something that's coming out, something that's creative, and being able to identify that for these leaders so that they know, oh, wait a second, something here is a gem that I need to know where I'm going to go. I think this is going to be a really important component of how we can help leaders moving forward too.
Yeah, let's talk about that. AI is certainly more and more in the forefront of how we as leaders have that centeredness and that clarity in our mind, body, and spirit. I found it's become a more useful tool in my day, as far as my assistant, if you will, my AI assistant, and conversations. Now I have conversations with my AI assistant regarding different aspects of my journey, and the learning part about who I am and what kind of information and data that is important to me has become part of the programming, if you will, and it's super helpful in terms of the creativity side, because it's a compendium. And granted, lots of growth and opportunity for AI. It certainly isn't. It's got a long way to go. However, I found it to be useful even in coming up with ideas for different types of experiences that I want to create, and fine-tuning those ideas, and really just being a way to access more helpful information to help me in my journey. Is that what you're experiencing as well?
So absolutely, it is an assistant. It can be very, very beneficial. What I'm also saying is, as AI gets more and more implemented, tasks that we used to do and were part of our bigger job description most likely will be automated through AI to some extent. And what this does, companies are having to change and increase their either services or products on a continual basis, right? Like back in the old days, you get a new car, but then the new model wouldn't come out for a long time. Everything was slower. Everything now is picking up in speed as to how we get things accomplished. So AI will be handling some of those administrative tasks, if you will, that we used to do. That allows us to not only use AI for some creativity and brainstorming, but this also allows us to really work with leaders to get over to the parasympathetic side, to they themselves be able to have that time like Steve Jobs did and others, to really think through their creativity as to what they want, how they want to vision the company going forward as well. And so I think it's a combination, and it could be potentially, as you said, like who knows exactly, but I see some ability for this to be really interesting. We're facing as a world a lot of issues and problems that we need to think through and develop a new approach to. And so this combination of using our own intuitive guidance and creativity to work with AI, I think is an area that's really going to be expanded upon going forward.
No, I agree. I found that some of the problems that I'm facing that I'll present to AI for some creative solutions broadens my purview of possibilities. And so the usefulness of that is immense. I mean, anywhere from just some sort of anecdotal, looking for personalized license plates for my car, lots of different ideas, or a joke here and there, or to more comprehensive. For example, you mentioned the sabbaticals that great leaders integrate into their days. I found that some of my most effective ideas I've had over the years, over the 30 years, have been when I was away. When I, as Ronald Heifetz would say, is getting on the balcony in his work on adaptive leadership, is stepping away from being in the forest to seeing the entire forest and what you need to do to effectively be a part of the change that's necessary. Of course, if we don't need change, we don't need leaders. So this is an important aspect of that. But and even asking the AI assistant, hey, I want to help me design a sabbatical that is, and fill in some blanks on a week long or 2 weeks long now, and explain what you do for a living and the different kinds of challenges that you face. Explain the human resource challenges and the financial challenges, some other things, and ask it to speak to those areas. Pick out some, find some blind spots in this and help me to flesh those out. I also ask it to give me counter arguments on them, and devil's advocate as we use that terminology, but really just counter arguments on some of the implementation pieces, and then an argument to the argument. And it's amazing. And in a matter of 14 seconds, I have a more a clearer picture of what's possible. Again, there's lots of room in that, but I couldn't have done that on my own. Right. And even with a group of people, it would have taken a half a day of a workshop. Now, that granted, that's still important, and we should do that. However, this is uncharted territory that's really useful in helping us as leaders to have more clarity.
So take that, because this is awesome, right? That now you have kind of a blueprint. Now you take that as a leader and you run it through your own filter. Like, will this work? Won't this work? Then you pull your team in and you have time dedicated to the next iteration of what's taking place. And you can brainstorm this out. So it's not that AI does it all. It's that you still need that creativity of us as humans and your team, but there's so much more that you can then begin, it gives you the framework to be able to think through things as you go forward.
Absolutely. Just like any other piece of technology, a computer, a telephone, so on. When we started doing taxes back in the 90s, early 90s, if you remember the red sheet, the blue sheet, and the green sheet, they were, you had the green sheet was your 1040 easy, I think oh gosh, I can't, it's been so long. Then you had the 1040A and then the long form on different colored, and you just had a pencil and you had paper and you had the code, and the time it took to prepare a tax return was, it was exponentially longer than using the tools that eventually were available to us. And that's the way I see AI today, as an advanced tool to help us to gather information much more efficiently. And it's going to continue to improve as we grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is great. And I hope I know we've covered a lot of territory, and however, it's around the same idea of that centeredness, that clarity, some aspects of emotional intelligence, of self-awareness, self-regulation, so that we can be the most effective leaders possible for all who we are blessed to shepherd.
Absolutely. Yep. This has been so much fun.
Well, before we go, I have a question.
Okay.
So I don't always get to ask this, but sometimes I do. So on the journey that we're talking about of life, and one day, not the 5 year, hopefully in however many more years that we're afforded this side of eternity, I love to envision ourselves on that great summit, that very end of the journey, when we can see everything and everyone we've had the opportunity and the pleasure to affect. When you're on that great summit, are at the very end of the journey. You can look at all that's transpired, all those who the lives you've touched. Uh, what is one thing that you would have liked others to say about you?
Well, wow. Um, Gosh, that's such a great question, right? So I always go back to why do I do what I do? Um, and truly, it's because I so love partnering with people. And, as much as they're evolving, I too am evolving each and every time too. So it's a joint partnership. I would really hope that at the end of the day, that is in essence what it was that they enjoyed partnering with me in an authentic way for us all just to raise up the ability for great leaders to be who they are.
Well, you are on your way.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being with me. Such a
This
treat.
is so much fun. So thank
Uh,
you.
oh, you bet. And our listener, I know, will have gotten a lot of value out of our conversation today.